Imagine running your hands through the soft, almost silken fibers of alpaca wool. Never heard of it? Alpaca fleece has become a global symbol of luxury and sustainability. Each year, millions of alpacas in high-altitude regions produce tons of this extraordinary and magical fiber. The most shocking part, however, is the fact that even though alpacas are shorn only a single time a year, they still produce around 3 to 5 kilograms of reusable fleece. But here's the tricky part about this incredibly soft wool. Producing the softest and finest alpaca wool is not an easy task like you'd assume. There are many secrets that go into creating something as fine as this, all individual steps determining whether you will end up with a coarse fabric or one you can run your fingers through without a single knot. Today at Whole Process, we'll be weaving through the fibers of alpaca wool to understand the intricate details of how such a magnificent fabric is spun into the coats and sweaters that you wear. The tradition of shearing alpacas isn't something that popped up recently. No, in fact, it actually dates back thousands of years and has actively been part of the Andean mountains, where alpaca wool is primarily exported from. Alpacas were first domesticated by the indigenous people in Peru and Bolivia over 6,000 years. We definitely mean it when we say this is not a recent advent. The timing for their annual shearing is around springtime. This is the point where the alpaca's fleece has grown sufficiently. It's a delicate process, often done by either hand or with scissors to avoid hurting the animal in any way. However, there's a special technique the shearers apply. They prioritize the blanket or saddle area, which is the part of the fleece on the alpaca's back and sides, usually having the highest quality fibers. Though not all the fleece makes the cut, coarser hairs like the guard hairs, manure tags, or even fleece that is stained by hapanescence get separated out from the final lot to make sure only the eBay quality is sent off to the processing facilities. This, in more broader terms, is known as skirting, where handlers remove any of the rougher edges or even vegetable matter from the lot. Then, the fleece goes through a thorough grading process. It's a tough competition in the market, so everything is weighed, from the fineness of the fleece to the length and even color. The finest fibers from this lot, like royal alpaca or baby alpaca, get reserved for the best yarns and higher quality products, whereas the slightly coarser ones are used for the less delicate products. But this isn't the end of the fleece's journey. No, there's still a long way to go. Next in line is washing, also known as scouring. Unlike sheep's wool, alpaca fibers have very little lanolin, which makes the whole washing debacle much easier and gentler. Now, you're probably wondering what lanolin is. It is a waxy substance secreted by sheep's sebaceous glands that coats their wool to protect it from weather. Oftentimes, it is extracted from the wool, purified, and even widely used as a natural moisturizer and emollient in skincare products, cosmetics, and ointments due to its ability to both lock in moisture and attract it to the skin. In commercial settings, processed fleeces usually go through multiple warm water baths with mild detergents. But that doesn't mean that everyone does it the same way. Some small-scale operations wash them by hand by gently soaking the fibers in lukewarm water for about 30 minutes. During this time, it's important not to agitate or rub the fibers to avoid any form of felting to happen. But do you want to know the craziest fact from all of this? Over 20% of the fleece's weight can be lost just by washing. Yes, and that is because of the fact that most of that weight is due to dust, plant debris, or even dead fibers, which all get discarded during the rinse cycles. Processors also tumble the fleece, which is a form of beating, chooch, or tumble, drying the fibers to shake out any and all residual dirt or dust before any new steps are taken. Then the fiber goes through a picker machine, which opens up and fluffs the fibers. During this picking process, the coarser guard hairs that were left over, along with any short fibers, get removed. Moving on to the next row of steps, carding takes the center stage. Carding is extremely important to get the final fleece to be uniform. It aligns all of the fibers by passing them through a series of rollers covered in fine wire teeth, together forming a sheet called a web. This uniform web of sorts is what manufacturers are after. Then the carded fiber may be formed into bats. which is an industrial term of saying flat sheets or roving, which again is a way of naming loose ropes. For higher quality yarn, the fiber's long winding trek doesn't just stop there. It actually gets a lot more complicated. But when you look at the final product, everything is completely worth it. The fibers actually go through combing afterward, which further aligns fibers, removes any pesky short fibers that have still snuck through, and produces very even slivers of fiber, perfect for the next steps. Another step, to increase the smoothness of the fibers, is also sometimes used. It's called drawing, and no, not the sketching kind. Drawing or drafting is the usage of drawing rollers to further attenuate the fiber before spinning. It's a small step that really can make a world of a difference in the final product's quality. Next in line comes spinning. Here, the pre-aligned fabrics and drawn fibers, which were created just a minute ago, go straight into a spinner. But why? Well, the answer is simple. So far, we've had a look at the fibers themselves, but they are not of much use without being turned into their primary form, yarn. In the form of yarn, they can be created into just about anything, and that is where this spinner comes in, to create that very yarn that we need. Spinners adjust the different parameters such as the amount of twist needed, the strand thickness, or even the rate at which the fibers are fed through. Each fleece can vary quite significantly in staple length, fineness, and strength. But a surefire way to enhance the strength of the yarn overall is that when a single strand is spun, the yarn can be plied together by twisting 2 or 3 single strands together. Once all this is done, the final yarn is then wound into cones, bobbins, or even skeins, all ready for knitting or even weaving. Depending on the production scale, there are 2 times that dyeing can be done. The first at either the top stage or the second after the yarn is spun. For natural or artisanal operations, non-toxic dyes or plant-based dyes are often used. After dyeing, the yarn may be washed again to remove excess dye, then dried gently. However, if the yarn is the type to be woven, 2 sets of yarn are interlaced on looms to create the final product. In contrast, when making knitted garments, yarn goes into knitting machines, or sometimes even hand knitters work by hand. For industrial knitting, modern machines use designs programmed in software and sensors to control stitch patterns. Regardless of the method chosen, the final product is always perfect, soft, and fluffy, with no faults to be found for miles. After knitting and weaving into the desired form, the final garments are washed and scoured again, then dried, and sometimes even ironed or pressed. This is to ensure that there is no grease left over at all. All this leads to final finishing, and if you're wondering what that entails, we're about to tell you. Final finishing includes trimming any loose ends, hemming fringes, or other handwork that has been left or even done choppily, all before the products are ready for sale. Alpaca fiber is similar in structure to sheep wool, but with smoother scales and higher tensile strength. One of its prized features is glossy luster and a very soft feel, especially when sourced from low-micron alpaca fleece. There are 2 main alpaca breeds, Huacaya, which has crimped, fluffy fleece, and Suri, whose fleece grows in long, silky locks. Since alpaca fleece has very little lanolin, the scouring or cleaning process, in other words, is less chemically intensive than for sheep wool. That is good news, of course. The lesser chemicals used, the better. Many alpaca producers and mills emphasize sustainability, water-efficient washing, biodegradable detergents, and humane shearing practices. Transparency in the supply chain is increasingly valued. Some brands explicitly trace their fiber from high-altitude Andean farms to mills and artisans. Because alpaca fiber has less natural grease, it tends to accumulate dust and vegetable matter, requiring careful cleaning. No one wants dirty wool. We certainly don't. The lack of lanolin also means the fiber can be statically clingy. Of course, there are methods around this, though. Some processors lightly condition the fiber by adding a hair gel-like agent to improve the texture of the fibers. But here's the crazy part that you're probably not aware of. Spinning alpaca wool is more complex than spinning regular wool. But why? Due to its unique structure, more twists may be needed to achieve the strength needed in the alpaca wool's fibers, especially for longer lengths. All this is definitely the first thing to consider when making things like shawls or rugs, etc. Items with regular wear and tear realistically are always going to be in need of more strength to withstand the forces. It's remarkable to think of the long journey this wool takes, from high up in the Andean mountains to traveling across the world in the shape of a wool sweater draped across your shoulders. Regardless of how you look at it, the shearing, the processing, and spinning of this wool is a story of patience, unwavering determination, and pure craftsmanship forged into each created piece. If you enjoyed discovering how alpaca wool is made, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves learning how everyday products come to life. Because every factory, every recipe, and every process has a story, and we'll be uncovering many more of them. As always, thank you for watching Whole Process. We'll see you in the next one.